welcome to another episode of Eat In with Adam and John. Today I am going to make one of my favorite kinds of cakes. It's carrot cake. The very first thing you should do when you're going to make carrot cake is preheat the oven. So it says 350 degrees and bake. So the recipe calls for three cups of grated carrots. So now, following the recipe, we start with the dry ingredients. So I'm going to need 2 cups of flour. And I just used the white flour. So again, I don't squish the flour down, I just settle it in gently with a spoon. Some people might use a sifter to really aerate the flour before putting it in the cups. I don't think that's really necessary, just as long as you're not squishing the flour down. Sugar. I keep my sugar in this sort of device because I cook with it a lot, so it's easy to pour out. So 1 cup and half a cup. The original recipe actually called for 1 3/4 cups, but after I've tried the recipe out a few times, I decided to reduce the sugar amount some. After the sugar comes the salt. So I need 1 teaspoon of salt. So now we have the spices. The original recipe just called for cinnamon, but I like nutmeg and cloves as well, so I added them to the recipe. For cinnamon, again, the original recipe called for 2 teaspoons. I put in 4 teaspoons of cinnamon. Matter of fact, I don't even bother smoothing it out. I'm probably putting like 8 teaspoons in, but I really like the cinnamon taste. If you're not as big a fan, then maybe you should use less. Next, I'll put in the nutmeg. Oops. I like the nutmeg, so I'm going to put in a teaspoon. If you're not a big fan of nutmeg, you could leave it out, or you could just put like a dash in. And then the cloves. Cloves I find is a very powerful spice, so I'm just going to put a dash of cloves in. Maybe that's 1/8 of a teaspoon, but it seems kind of a waste to measure it out. Baking powder. 1 1/4 teaspoons. Mix up the dry ingredients so it gets all nice and mixed together. This way you won't end up with one part of the cake having a huge amount of cinnamon while another part is just a huge amount of sugar. Then we move on to the liquid ingredients. So first is oil. So the recipe calls for 3/4 a cup, however I've reduced it down to half a cup. You need some oil to help smooth things out, but I think sometimes they put more in than necessary. The next ingredient is half a cup of milk. I use soy milk, however any milk is fine. Skim milk, whole milk, 2%. After the milk is 3 large eggs. So that's all the liquid ingredients. So now we mix this up. As you can see, it looks pretty well mixed up now. There's no big chunks anywhere, and I think I'm ready to go on to the next step, which is adding the carrots. Just dump them right in. You could probably do a little bit by a little bit by a little bit, but I don't. So I get this all nice and mixed up. Not nearly as smooth of a batter now because of all the carrot chunks. You want half a cup of pecans. I get the pecan halves and I chop them up myself. So after you're done chopping up half a cup of pecans, just put them on in there. So then you mix the pecans in. I would recommend mixing the pecans and the carrots in separately. Now that is the cake batter. All the ingredients are now in there. So you want to take the cake pan, in this case, so you want to first grease it up. I like to use spray oil. It's very convenient, very easy. Then I get the bottom and the sides. Give it a nice sheen of the spray oil. And then you're going to want to put some flour on it. The spray oil does grease up the cake pan and could be enough maybe, but if you put the flour on as well, then you're almost guaranteed that your cake's going to pop out nice and easily. And you want to get the flour nice and evenly on the bottoms and the sides. Don't forget the sides. The next, I usually like to get one of these doohickeys. I think it's called a spatula. I'm not 100% sure. Because it just makes it so much easier to get the cake batter out of the bowl. So you'll just, boom, cleans it up right on the side so incredibly easily. For years, I always used a spoon for this part, but now that I've gotten one of these spatula thingies, I just always use them because it's so much quicker and easier. Take your cake pan, put it in the oven, and it'll be cooked for 40 to 45 minutes. So I will set my timer for 45 minutes, and as soon as it's done, I'll pull it out. Alright, well, the 45 minutes have passed, so we can check on our cake. Let's see. Ooh, it looks really nice. That cake. It's real good. So I'm going to leave that over here to cool down. And while that's cooling down, we can make the frosting. Now for the frosting on a carrot cake, as you know, it's a cream cheese frosting. And this is about 8 ounces. So I use the entire package. Next, of course, is the most important part of any frosting, the sugar. Now for this, you use powdered sugar, and we'll use 1 cup of powdered sugar. And then I'll just start mixing that in. Now this is cream cheese and sugar mixing. You don't get to stir. You got to kind of just sort of chop it in using a fork. And this time you definitely want to use a fork for this. And during this process, I also like to add a teaspoon of vanilla. Give it a little vanilla flavor there. That gets pretty well mixed in. Alright, so we've waited a little while and the cake's cooled down. So now you just flip it onto whatever sort of serving tray you want to use. So you sort of smooth out the frosting. Just so it's sort of an even layer. You don't want like a huge clump anywhere. And voila, you get a lovely little cake. And thank you for joining us on this episode of Eat In. And I hope you'll see us again in the future. Thank you.